Hello there, I have with me Mark Kramer, professor at the John F. Kennedy School of Government in Harvard, as well as a senior fellow of the FSG. Of course, known as Michael Porter's co-author as well. He is someone who will bring in the next few minutes on shared value, something which he and Mike Porter have been signing off on and are known for their ideas, and for sure a step that it represents over and above what we understand as CSR, corporate social responsibility, and thereon. So Mark, glad to see you here.
Thank you, very happy to be here.
And I would like to start off straight to the point. Which Indian company impresses you in the line of shared value concepts that you talk about?
You know, there are many examples, and there are so many opportunities to use business models to help solve social problems in India today. So let me give you just a couple examples. One company that impresses me greatly is a company called Jain Irrigation. And they have specialized in drip irrigation systems for very small hole, low-income farmers. Drip irrigation is when you have hoses that put just a little bit of water next to each plant, and it conserves water tremendously. And as you know, about 80% of the fresh water use is for agriculture in this country.
Right, and you are not talking of Israel here, you're talking
No, I'm talking about an Indian company that is working with smallhold farmers in India, and what they've done...
And in Africa as well?
I believe they are expanding to Africa. They have been growing about 40% a year. It's now about $1 billion company. But they have really tailored their product to meet the needs of the smallhold farmer, who may be illiterate, who may have very limited budgets and needs financing, who may need extension workers and support in how to use the technology and how to grow crops more effectively. And so they can actually document that they are helping these low-income farmers increase their yields, increase their livelihoods, at the same time that they are conserving water.
How is this different from some company which is doing this out of a shared responsibility, as we often understand under CSR, that you are working with your neighboring community and you're doing it out of some kind of societal value system?
You know, CSR is very much about a company mitigating the harm in its value chain and the operations that it does every day.
It's more like a defense in your opinion.
Absolutely. Whereas shared value goes beyond that and says there are opportunities for new products, new markets, new innovations that can help companies make more money at the same time that they help solve social problems.
And is this any different than triple bottom line?
I think it is different than triple bottom line. And you know, all of these concepts are important. Shared value does not replace CSR. It does not replace triple bottom line reporting. Companies need to be attentive to the social and environmental consequences of their actions. But those are fundamentally about reporting on the company's operations, about often being an extra cost or constraint on the operation. Whereas shared value is really about innovation to help solve problems that the company didn't cause.
I'm quite intrigued you say this, because the government in various forms in India is thinking from time to time, if there were a way to say 3% of your turnover should be in corporate social responsibility, and most companies say, hey, for example, in broadcasting sector, how do we decide 3% of the total content that we are giving out, or in any other sector that you refer to. So you are talking of possibly a method which allows the company to really covet this principle,
yes,
rather than fear it under societal pressure.
That's right, and we have talked to various folks in government about the idea of having this set aside apply to shared value initiatives where companies can actually invest and make money rather than just philanthropic ones or corporate social responsibility ones.
So give me another example beyond Jain.
I'd love to, and there are many social enterprises that are starting up at a smaller level to help solve social problems.
In India?
In India. So one of my favorite examples there is a company called Vatsalya, which has been around just for about 5 or 6 years. They started with a $200,000 investment. And the principle was there are many, many rural communities in India that need access to healthcare. And building a hospital is very expensive, all the equipment and so on. But what Vatsalya realized is that 70% of the needs can be handled by a very, very streamlined operation. You don't need to build a hospital, you can just rent a building. You need an ultrasound, you need an x-ray, you need a ventilator. You don't need more equipment than that.
So asset light, in one word,
exactly,
allows you to redeploy resources around the customer need.
So that's right. So they found they can open up one of these clinics for a couple $100,000. It can be paid back in 6 to 12 months. They can serve 50,000 people a year with each one of these. They just closed a $10 million venture capital investment. They think this is a $5 billion opportunity.
I'm quite surprised you say this, because when we really look at certain Indian hospitals, the venture capitalist looks at the land first. And the value of the land is what is often sold in the multiples. So the others are looking at a network-based approach,
yes,
which is what you seem to be referring.
Yes.
But typically, the metric remains how many beds and how much land that you own. So what you seem to
and this is quite different in terms of where the value lies.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other examples. Novartis, the pharmaceutical company, realized they were doing fine selling their medicines in the cities, but they weren't reaching the rural areas. And they realized it was a real market failure, because people in these areas didn't have basic health-seeking behavior to diagnose symptoms, to go to a doctor. Most of the healthcare providers had no healthcare training. And even if you went to a healthcare provider and got prescription, the odds are you couldn't find the drug or medicine you needed nearby. So Novartis said, maybe we can actually address all of these issues. And so they hired 300 healthcare workers to go out and do basic education in the villages, not salespeople, but basic healthcare education. They began doing 2-week-long training sessions for healthcare providers. They developed a distribution chain to 50,000 local clinics and did a deal with Vodafone. So if you reported your inventory levels on your cell phone, you got 3 minutes. And the result is they're now selling to a population of 42 million people that they couldn't reach before. They found a whole new business model that they're now exporting to Vietnam and to Kenya. But at the same time, they've created a healthcare infrastructure that neither the government nor the civil society has been able to put in place there.
I'm quite interested when you say this, because staying on the area of medicines, India is embarking upon what is arguably one of the world's most amazing, if not inefficient, leaps into having free medicines prescribed by doctors in a list of 300 or 400 for something like $4 billion. So if this scheme can actually take off, it can transform it can have
Absolutely.
a transformative effect.
Absolutely.
However, which companies will see value in giving to the government bulk drugs without any of the bells and whistles with which branded drugs and molecules bring in?
Sure, it's about generic drugs, absolutely.
So how would a company which is actually invested in medicine, which has invested billions into a molecule, actually benefit from the shared value perception of the government of India in this example, which I'm throwing just like that?
You're throwing at it, I don't really understand the details, but you're saying the government would require the medicines to be distributed for free? Is that what you're saying?
The entire gamut of hospitals in
Yes.
the government sector
Yes.
will allow doctors
Yes.
to select any of the 400 medicines in a list
Yes.
and be able to prescribe them for free to anyone, and these medicines will only be bulk drugs. So which company amongst
Well, so the companies that are well positioned with generics and with the low-cost drugs, and actually one of the reasons this strategy made sense for Novartis is that Sandoz, their subsidiary, is focused entirely on generics. This is an important part of their competitive positioning. And so the strategy to create shared value really ties into their competitive positioning. And
if any CEO other than Jain Irrigation or Novartis sectors that they represent is listening to this, what are your 2 or 3 key messages, Mark, which you would like to share?
Well, I think the key message is to look throughout the company's value chain and at your competitive positioning, and try and identify what are the social issues that matter most to the success of your business. Not because you want a good reputation, not because you're trying to silence critics, but because really helping to solve those social problems will give an economic benefit to your company. And then look at where there is the overlap between the skills and resources you have as a company, a social need, and a business opportunity. And there you will find the opportunity to create shared value. And Porter would tell you, if he were here with us today, that he sees this as the biggest development in strategy for the coming decade. That companies have systematically ignored the social dimension of their strategy, and they have lost tremendous opportunities because of it.
Isn't it that the CEOs or CXOs at any rate are looking at the stock market, and the stock market doesn't see this? So are we talking beyond stock market here, or who will really incentivize and reward a company which is very profit making? It has oodles of cash in its war chest. The stock market is very happy with it, and yet it is drilling a hole in the environment, or is doing odd things to the community around it, as we see in the instance of the coal companies in India, which are the darlings of the stock market at some level. The government sees them as very good people, but the local communities are aghast at the sort of hole they are drilling by way of inducing thermal energy into the development system.
Sure. Well, I'll respond in two ways. The first is to say that we don't mean to suggest that shared value is a panacea, and that there's no question there are times that the economic interest of companies, in particular their short-term economic interest, can be contrary to social issues. And there is a need for government regulation under those circumstances, because it is natural for companies to pursue their profit to the nth degree unless there is some regulatory restriction. But there are a whole set of other issues where companies can make money by solving the problems. And right now, we're often addressing those issues through philanthropy or through government. But the problem is that companies, when we leave them out of the equation, we lose their ability to innovate, we lose their ability to do things at scale. I was just with Nestle this morning. They distribute 100 million Maggi cubes, which are micronutrient reinforced bullion cubes. 100 million a day in West and Central Africa. That's scale. And we also, when companies find a business model to solve a social problem, we're also able to sustain that going forward without having to raise charitable dollars or tax revenues. And so there will always be a need for philanthropy, there will always be a need for regulation. But the more social problems we can tackle through shared value, the more we can preserve those scarce resources of philanthropy to where they are uniquely needed.
Staying with this middle ground that you referred to, typically no company would say that they don't want to solve a big social problem. But yes, they would often leave it at the government's doorsteps, but given a choice, they would like to sort out a small problem. Now, is there a value in aiming higher? And
I think there is. Again, what companies can do, and particularly large companies, is operate at a scale that most NGOs, civil society organizations cannot. Just a simple example, McDonald's in the US, under pressure, decided to put apples in the children's, they call them Happy Meals, rather than some of the French fries. Overnight, they doubled America's consumption of apples. That's the scale at which companies can operate, which most nonprofits cannot. So I think that while there are certainly opportunities for companies to start small, and every company we see has started with an experiment, with a small initiative to really test this model, because it's often selling to a different kind of population, selling a different kind of product, a different distribution model. But once they have found that there's a model that works, they have the ability to scale it up, and that's really part of the virtue.
So shared value isn't about something which you can outsource to an NGO and feel good about it at the end of the day. It's about having the NGO right inside your heart and then running it bloody well.
That's a wonderful way to put it. It is about using the core capabilities of your business to solve social problems.
Give me another illustration beyond the McDonald's, which...
Well, you know, there are many global companies we see that are moving in this direction. So GE, General Electric, has two initiatives, one they call Healthy Imagination, one they call Ecomagination. Healthy Imagination is about developing new low-cost healthcare products that can reach populations that had no access before. So for example, they've created an electrocardiogram machine that is portable. It's operated by a battery, you can carry it in a backpack, it can transmit the results through cell phone to a remote clinic for interpretation, and it is reaching hundreds of millions of people who had no access to that diagnosis before. The other product line, Ecomagination, is about new energy efficient products. And I was talking to someone from GE recently, he said these two product lines, they're already about $20 billion in revenue, are growing 10 times as fast as the other core product lines of GE. And GE has committed $10 billion to research and development in these two areas. And to me, that's another example of the virtue of bringing companies to the table. Because what nonprofit, what NGO could commit $10 billion to research and development in low-cost medical technology or more efficient energy products?
Right, Mark, I hear you, but what if I'm not GE and I have 6 zeros which are missing in my... so
well,
what can I do then?
I think there are opportunities for companies at every level to create shared value. It depends on the region where you operate, the scale at which you operate, and again, the unique capabilities that you bring in your business. There are so many social entrepreneurs in India. I really think India is the global center of social entrepreneurship. And there's so many social entrepreneurs that are starting small. Operations like Husk Power, which use the husks of rice to generate power in small villages. They do it, they make money. It's a very low-cost operation, but it's something that was started from scratch just a few years ago. There are many innovations we see out there that social entrepreneurs are starting very small.
So size isn't a sufficient condition, just as being small doesn't really deter you from creating shared value.
Absolutely not. And there are many opportunities to address a social problem where someone who is very close to the community will really understand the needs of the community and the business opportunity there better than someone coming in from a global multinational company.
So what are folks who are connected to youth via the social media, where the global expanse of problem solving as well as problem clients can possibly be connected to you? So how does one actually define geographies? Just as we discussed, scale is not an issue. Is geography an issue?
It can be, and so there are some shared value initiatives, like the Novartis one in the villages in India, which is very geographically focused in a very specific region. There are others. Cisco, the networking company, realized a number of years ago that the shortage of trained network administrators was a constraint on their growth. Now, they could have said, we're not in the business of educating network administrators, we're not a school, but instead they said, we could solve this problem. And so they created a distance learning academy that taught networking. There had to be a physical place where you could work on the equipment, so they had to do it with local schools or universities or grassroots organizations around the world. Well, they've been doing this now about 7 or 8 years. They've trained 4 million people around the world. And 70% of those people have a new and better job because of the training they received.
How does Novartis gain? The company Cisco gain?
Cisco gains because in order for them to sell their equipment to customers, customers have to be able to hire people to maintain it.
Oh.
And so they have overcome one of the real constraints on their growth. And they're also training people on Cisco equipment, which gives them a further competitive advantage.
Right, so you have people like us, so to speak, on the other side who wouldn't necessarily need to be taking up the entire knowledge chain, and therefore Cisco as a large player benefits from seeding that kind of talent into the market.
Exactly, they're now graduating 1 million people a year, and they're in 160 countries. So this is a situation where geography is irrelevant because it's being done through the internet, through distance learning.
What if an individual entrepreneur who is self-employed, who has only one person, a proper consultant, if they are listening to it, let's focus on them. How would they benefit from shared value?
Well, if they happen to be a consultant, I think there's tremendous opportunity, because we see that companies have really missed business opportunities because they've been ignoring the social dimension. And I think that there is an emerging interest around the world in consulting to this space. We are actually creating with Mike Porter a shared value initiative, which is trying to build a sort of global network of consultants who want to do this kind of work. And the initial 50 or 60 folks that have reached out to us are really all over the world: Bolivia, Finland, India to be sure, Australia, Chile, Mexico. It is really a global opportunity. You know, you look at a company like Walmart, and their whole strategy is to be the lowest cost. And until about 5 years ago, they weren't paying attention to their energy costs because they thought of it as an externality. They weren't thinking about it. They decided they had to clean up their environmental footprint and really put effort into this. And the result is they're now saving $3 billion over the next 5 years in costs, right to the bottom line. And they missed that before because they hadn't been focused on the social and environmental consequences of their activities. And so there's a tremendous opportunity for consultants to come in and help companies see what they've been missing by looking at the social and environmental consequences.
Right, so those hearing this would typically then, how would they reach out and how would they get a culture?
Yes, I mean, so there's a shared value initiative, sharedvalue.org, that is beginning to gather people together who are interested in this to share knowledge and learn from each other. We're beginning to develop some executive training materials, business school curriculum, etc., to teach people how to do this kind of work.
And this is going to then create force multipliers for this.
We certainly hope so.
Right. Have you patented it?
We have not patented, and there's been real discussion about that, but we have not patented because we believe this is a public good. FSG, the consultancy that Mike Porter and I created, is itself a nonprofit. It is itself an NGO. And the goal here is to help solve social problems more effectively and to engage businesses in finding ways to do that. And so it can't be about hiring Mike Porter or FSG to do the work. Some companies will, but many companies have to figure out how to do this on their own or with other consultants helping.
Right. So therefore the thought process would be to get these people to understand the template and then
Yes.
Help solve the problem. Now, perhaps amongst the last things on my mind would be that communities are expected to know their problems a lot better, just as companies living in those communities should have empathized with them. So where is the need for FSG or Mark Kramer or Mike Porter? Do you really think people are too close to a problem to even see it?
I think they are, and it's really a different way of thinking. You know, we're seeing companies begin to redefine themselves. So Nestle is saying, we're not a food company, we're a health and nutrition company. Nike is saying we're about health. IBM is saying we're about smarter planets, smarter cities, about solving problems that cities and countries face. It's not just about selling computers. But what we find is that for companies really to redefine themselves around the social mission that's part of their competitive positioning is a multi-year journey. It really affects how you do marketing, it affects how you do investment, it affects how you do supply chain, it affects how you do logistics. It affects every dimension of the company. And to really roll this out in a company takes time and does indeed take support.
So do you also work with stock markets and agents of change such as private equity guys to understand this, or actually they're just waiting for this to happen?
No, we have worked with some investment firms like BlackRock, and we know that firms, buyout firms like KKR, have actually gone through their portfolio of companies to figure out how they can improve performance by looking at the environmental performance and the social performance and developing new business models for the companies they own. So we think this is a very powerful angle for investors to pursue. And there are investment firms like Generation Management out of the UK that are really focused on picking companies that create shared value and have had a truly superior investment return over the last 5 or 6 years by doing that.
Good. In fact, I might like to inform you here on air that there is GreenX, which is part of the Bombay Stock Exchange's various indices, which captures the energy consumed sector-wise of companies.
Okay.
And then there is an incentive inbuilt, and happy also report that the GreenX has been outperforming the Sensex year on year for the last 2 or 3 years. So there are elements
Yes.
which are incentivizing such action, and more power to your word, to your pen, and to your work.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
That was Mark Kramer.